A biomechanics specialist who examined him during his tour rolled was polite about it, but thorough. She used words like permanently altered muscular kilo structure and compensatory development. She concluded that Minute would be comfortable. As a pleasure horse, a good companion, easy to ride, enjoyable for trails, she did not recommend investing in him competitively. Ray Pute had driven for hours for Milk Replacer to keep this horse alive. Now, he quietly shelved any competitive ambitions he'd nursed for him. Minute was given a good life in the pasture. Plenty of space, good feed, the company of other horses. He was healthy and calm and completely unremarkable. He was, as far as anyone at the Pute Ranch could tell, a very nice horse that would never be anything more than that. That was the understanding. That was the consensus. That was wrong. Carol Brady was 58 years old and had been riding endurance competitively for 30 years. She had completed 2,300-mile rides. She had won regionally, placed nationally, and trained horses that other people had given up on more times than she could. Count, she was not a woman who missed things. She came to the Pute Ranch on a Thursday afternoon in the spring of Minute's third year. She wasn't there for Minute. She was evaluating one of his half-siblings, a well-grown, beautifully striding 3-year-old that Ray had mentioned to a mutual friend. Exactly the kind of horse Carol was looking for. Long, efficient stride, good bone, solid temperament. She was watching the half-sibling move in the round pen, clipboard in hand, making notes. The evaluation was going well. The horse was everything he looked like on paper. And then Minute trotted past the fence on his way to the water trough. Carol stopped writing. She watched him for maybe 15 seconds. He wasn't performing. He wasn't being asked to do anything. He was just moving from one point to another. A choppy, efficient, ground-covering trot that everyone at the Pute Ranch had spent 3 years apologizing for. But Carol Brady wasn't looking at him through the lens of a halter judge or a show trainer. She was looking at him through 30 years of endurance racing, and what she saw stopped her cold. That stride wasn't wasting a single ounce of energy on elevation. Every footfall was converting effort directly into forward motion. His top line was relaxed. His breathing was unhurried. He was covering ground the way a distance runner covers ground. Not beautifully, but efficiently, ruthlessly efficiently. She turned to Ree. "What's the story on that one?" Ree told her the whole history, premature birth, the 9 days in the barn, the developmental irregularities, the biomechanics report, the shelved ambitions. Carol listened the way a person listens when they're doing math in their head. "Can I see him move properly?" "Sure," Ree said, "but I'll save you the time. The vet's report is pretty definitive." Carol looked at him steadily. "Vets are definitive about the wrong things sometimes. Can I see him move?" Ray brought Minute to the round. Pen Carol watched him trot for 5 minutes. Then she asked for a canare. Then she asked Ree to bring out a heart rate monitor. She carried one in her truck because of course she did. And she checked Minute's recovery rate after 10 minutes of sustained movement. She looked at the numbers, looked at them again, looked at Minute, who was standing quietly, already completely calm. That familiar drowsy expression settled over him like he'd just woken up from a pleasant nap. "Ree," she said carefully, "how long has this horse been sitting in a pasture?" "About a year, and nobody has talked to you about endurance." Ree stared at her. "That horse, he can barely trot pretty." Carol looked back at Minute. When she spoke, her voice had the quiet certainty of someone who has been in a sport long enough to know what they're looking at. Endurance horses don't need to trot pretty. They need to trot forever. And this horse, I think he might be able to do exactly that. Putes agreed to a 6-week trial. Carol took a Minute to her conditioning facility. Outside Kerrville, 6 weeks became 12.12, became 6 months. What she discovered in that time systematically dismantled the biomechanics report. Not by proving it wrong on its own terms, but by revealing that it had been asking the wrong questions entirely. Yes, his stride was choppy by show standards. But his stride efficiency ratio, the energy cost per mile covered, was extraordinary. She'd measured it in horses for 30 years. She'd never seen numbers quite like his. His gut motility under sustained exertion was robust. This matters enormously in endurance racing because horses can die from digestive shutdown during long efforts. It's one of the most common reasons horses are pulled from 100-mile races. Minet's digestive system, tested under increasing training loads, simply kept working. His hooves dense and tough from that compensatory bone development everyone had treated as a flaw, handled rocky hill country terrain that was tearing up horses with textbook perfect conformation, and his recovery. Metrics, pulse, and respiration returning to baseline after hard effort. In endurance, horses are checked by veterinarians at every hold point during a race. Horse that doesn't recover to acceptable parameters is pulled from competition immediately, regardless of where they stand in the field. Carol had spent her career trying to improve recovery numbers in horses. Minutes were, to use her word, absurd in the best possible way. She called Ree on a Sunday evening, 6 months into the trial. "I want to tell you something about your horse," she said, "and I need you to hear it properly, okay? He didn't develop wrong. His premature birth forced his body to be maximally efficient with every resource it had. He built himself for survival. And it turns out that what you build for survival, if you point it in the right direction, is the exact foundation of an endurance horse. He was always going to be built for a longer race. We just didn't know it yet." There was a long silence. "On the line? So, what do we do now?" Ray asked. "We enter him in a qualifier," Carol said, "and we find out how right I am." The Texas Hill Country 50-meet qualifier sat on the racing calendar in early October. 50 miles of limestone, cedar, and elevation. Change that had humbled horses with far more conventional credentials than Minet possessed. He walked off the trailer at the ride meeting looking like someone had brought their backyard pony to a professional sporting event. The other horses were tall, powerful, specifically bred for exactly this moment. 16-hand Arabians with bloodlines. That read like a who's who of endurance racing royalty. Minet stood among them at 143.com, and apparently unimpressed. A competitor who had been racing for 20 years looked at him, looked at Carol, looked back at him. "Is that an Arabian?" she asked. "He is," Carol said. "Is he going the whole 50? "That's the plan." The woman nodded slowly, the way people nod when they're being polite about their skepticism. Call's strategy for the first 25 miles was simple. Find his rhythm, and don't interfere with it. Let him settle. Don't ask for more than he offers. Conserve Minet ran mid-pack. Not flashy, not inspiring. It's a kind of performance that if you were watching without context, you might describe as fine. Acceptable, unremarkable. At the 2 5-mile veterinary hold, his recovery numbers came in second fastest in the entire field. The vet, checking him, looked at his card, looked at the horse, looked at Carol. "What is this horse?" "A mistake that worked out," Carol said. The final 15 miles were where the qualifier revealed itself. This was where the limestone got serious. Where the elevation pushed horses to their limits. Where breeding and preparation and heart got sorted out from each other. Horses around Minet began to tire. Their riders asked for more and got less. The gap between effort and output widened in a way that endurance veterans recognize and fear. Minet didn't accelerate. He didn't surge dramatically. He simply maintained. His trot didn't change. His head stayed level. While horses that had towered over him at the start line grunted and labored up the grade. Minet kept moving with that economical, unhurried, utterly relentless rhythm, eating up ground that was defeating animals twice his size. He finished 4th overall, and he won the Best Condition Award. In endurance racing, the Best Condition Award is given to the horse judged most physically fit relative to the work performed. It's an assessment of how the horse looks coming out. The other side. Pulse, respiration, gut sounds, muscle tone, attitude, hydration. It measures not just speed, but the cost of that speed on the animal. Serious endurance competitors will tell you quietly that best condition is harder to win than the race itself. Donna Pute had driven out to the finish line alone, not telling Ray where she was going. She stood at the rail as Minet came in. They announced the best condition result. She put her face in her hands. She was thinking about a cot in a barn, about 4-hour drives for milk replacer, about 9 days of not knowing if any of it would matter. It had mattered. The Big Country 100 is not a race that forgives. 100 meters of Texas hill country terrain starting before dawn and finishing, for the horses that finish it all, well into the following day. The completion rate in most years sits below 60%. The horses that don't finish aren't failures. They're simply horses that encountered the honest limit of what their bodies could sustain. Carol entered Minute the following spring. The endurance community is small and interconnected, and word had traveled. People had heard about the premature foe, about the biomechanics report, about the best condition award on a horse that had no business competing. Some were curious, some were dismissive in the specific way experts are dismissive of things that threaten their framework. One prominent competitor asked at a regional meeting what she thought about Minute's entry said this: "Arabians are bred for endurance over centuries. Bloodlines matter. Confirmation matters. A horse compromised doesn't unbecome compromised because someone tells a nice story about him." It was a fair thing to say. It was also wrong. But nobody knew that yet. Start line of the big country, 100 at 4:30 in the morning, is one of the stranger sights in equestrian sport. 73 horses and riders moving in the darkness, headlamps catching the breath mist of horses and humans alike. The hill country silent except for hooves and the creak of tack. Carol and Minute left the line without ceremony. There was nothing to announce yet. By mile 40, 18 horses had been pulled. Heat stress, lameness, metabolic complications, the attrition rate was running ahead of the historical average. By mile 60, Minute was in the top 10. Moving through the field steadily, as horses that had started ahead of him slowed or stopped. His vet checks remained exceptional. At each hold point, the veterinarians examining him exchanged the same look. The look of professionals encountering data that doesn't match their expectations. At mile 75, the vet who had checked him at the qualifier found herself checking him again. She pulled Carol aside at the hold. "I've been doing this for 20 years, she said quietly. "I've never seen numbers like this at mile 75 of 100. Carol nodded. She already knew. She'd been watching his ears, still forward, still curious, still engaged. At mile 75 of a 100 miles, her horse was paying attention to the world around him. The final 25 miles of an endurance 100 are where everything true about a horse comes forward. It's where breeding and training stop being the story, and something harder to name takes over. Carol would say afterward that she stopped riding Minute somewhere. Around mile 80, she simply went along with what he decided to do. Crossed the finish line of the big country, 102nd place overall, best condition award again. In a field of purpose, bred experienced open 100-mile horses. Animals whose entire existence had been shaped toward this single discipline. A horse born 5 weeks too early, written off by a veterinary biomechanics specialist, left in a pasture for a year, had just completed one of the most demanding athletic tests in equestrian sport, and outperformed animals worth 20 times his purchase price. Carol Brady stood beside Minute as the awards were announced. One hand on his neck, feeling his pulse already dropping back toward resting, already recovering because that's what he did. She was 59 years old. She had spent 30 years in this sport, and she had never cried at a finish line. She cried at this one, not because he'd won, because she understood what she was standing next to. A horse whose body had been built by crisis, shaped by survival, refined by years of quiet and waiting, and then pointed at the one discipline in the world where all of it was exactly right. The biomechanics specialist who had written the original report on Minute heard about the big country 100 results through a colleague. She reached out to Carol 2 weeks later, not defensively, not to justify her original conclusions. She reached out because she was genuinely professionally curious about what she had missed. The conversation they had about how endurance demands a completely different physical vocabulary than the metrics she'd been trained to evaluate became a continuing education paper. Distributed in veterinary circles the following year, she put her name on it. She didn't have to. Her willingness to be wrong publicly and to learn from it publicly was its own quiet act of professional courage. The half-sibling that Carol had originally come to the Butte Ranch to evaluate the beautiful, well-striding prospect that had been the whole reason for her visit. never made it as an endurance horse. Metabolic issues surfaced in his second competitive season. He was retired to light trail work. The horse Carol had almost walked past on her way to the round pen became the center of her competitive program for the next 7 years. Ray Pute does not describe himself as a sentimental man. He'll tell you this directly if you give him the chance. He's a rancher. He is practical. He made a decision to keep fighting for a compromised foe because his wife was already sleeping in the barn and he wasn't going to be the one to tell her to stop. He will tell you all of this. And then, if you ask him what men means to him, something changes in his face that he doesn't seem entirely aware of. I spent 3 years apologizing for that horse. He said once in an interview he agreed to, only because Donna made him, apologizing to vets, to trainers, to anyone who came out here and looked at him and told me what I already knew, that he wasn't what we'd hoped for. 3 years of sorry about this one. He stopped, looked out toward the pasture. Turns out the one who needed to apologize was me. Carol Brady, who had quietly been considering retirement before a chance visit to a Fredericksburg ranch, changed her mind, won her first national-level endurance title at 61, with Minute. She has since taken on 3 other horses that didn't fit conventional molds. Horses that other trainers had passed over, dismissed, declared unsuitable. She is becoming known in a sport not given to sentimentality as the trainer you call when you have a horse that doesn't make sense. Says she learned one lesson from Minute that changed the way she evaluates every horse she looks at now. I spent 30 years looking for horses built for endurance. I was looking for the right conformation, the right stride, the right bloodline, the right numbers on paper. Minute taught me I was looking for the wrong thing. I should have been looking for a horse that already knew how to survive, because a horse that already knows how to survive, you point that horse at the longest. It's the hardest race you can find and you get out of the way. Minute is 12 years old now. He lives at the Pute Ranch, retired to pasture, after a competitive career that included 1,100-mile completions, 6 Best Condition awards, and a regional record in the Hill Country 100 that still stands. His recovery metrics, according to the vets who have followed him for years, have barely changed from his early career. It's as if his body has a ceiling it never quite reaches. Carol visits every few weeks. She brings carrots, which he accepts with the same unhurried patience he brings to everything. She'll stand at the fence sometimes and just watch him graze. That choppy, economical trot carrying him from one patch of good grass to the next is the trot that everyone spent years apologizing for. She doesn't apologize for it anymore. A version of Minute's story that is about endurance racing, about Arabian horses, about the science of premature equine development, and the biomechanics of stride efficiency. That version is true, but it's not the whole story. The whole story is about what happens when the thing that was supposed to disqualify, it turns out to be the thing that makes you. About the difference between being built wrong and being built for something nobody has thought to look for yet. About the people who sleep on CS in cold barns for 9 days because a small, shivering, compromised life is trying to hold on, and that seems like enough of a reason to fight. Donna Pute was asked recently what she would say to someone who told her, in the spring of 2014, that keeping that premature foe alive wasn't worth the effort. She thought about it for a moment. "I'd say you were measuring the wrong thing," she said. "You were measuring what he looked like right then. I was measuring what he was trying to do. He was trying to live. Turns out that was enough. Turns out it was everything." If Minute's story moved you, hit subscribe. We meet horses like him every single week, animals who were overlooked, underestimated, and told they would never measure up. But we also meet the people who refuse to accept that final verdict, the ones who see potential where others see problems. And together they create partnerships that completely rewrite what everyone thought was possible. Now I want to hear from you. Drop a comment below and tell us. Have you ever known a horse or even a person who was counted out before they finally found the race they were truly meant to run? We read every story, and we love sharing in those moments of redemption. If this message speaks to you, take a second to subscribe to Stories for Horseback so you never miss the powerful journeys we bring you each week. If you're watching from somewhere around the world, tell us your country in the comments. We're Always amazed to see how far these stories travel. And if you know someone who needs a reminder that being built differently doesn't mean being built wrong, share this video with them today. 8. Sometimes the right encouragement at the right time can change everything. Thank you for being part of this community, and we'll see you in the next story.